real healing involves some degree of personal renunciation, a kind of personal challenge to grow. Forgiveness is essentially a change in story. If we stay angry, then the anger starts collecting, so to speak, in the same pathways as physical pain. The only way we really pay anybody back is by being happy enough that what they did no longer matters. And that is such a powerful reminder.
Welcome to the FitMind podcast, where we explore the frontiers of human potential, mindfulness, and neuroscience. I'm your new host, Josh, and I'm super honored to be filling in, at least for now, as my dear friend Liam dedicates more of his time to the practice. He'll still be super involved, just a little bit more in the background. So today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Fred Luskin, a pioneering expert in the science of forgiveness and the founder of the Stanford Forgiveness Project. Dr. Luskin has spent years researching how forgiveness can improve mental and physical health, and his work has been widely recognized for helping individuals transform their relationships and release emotional burdens. Through his research at Stanford and his acclaimed books, he's become a leading voice on how letting go of grievances can lead to greater well-being and resilience. I'm excited to dive into his insights and explore the powerful impact forgiveness can have on our lives. So, without further ado, I welcome Dr. Fred Luskin. Fred, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, I'd love to dive straight in. What was it that led you to focus your research and career around this concept of forgiveness?
It's honestly a mixed blessing. It's wonderful to be of help, but it sucks to see how horrible people are to each other. It's not so simple. It's like the yin and the yang or the full catastrophe. I see both. And there are times when the suffering or the ugliness, they're too much. And there are other times where, I'm doing good or I'm helping people, but it's a fine line. You can't wade into people's being mistreated on a whole variety of levels without like throwing up your hands and saying, hey, enough. Or like, when will human beings learn to be decent to each other? And it brings up a lot of difficult questions.
Absolutely, it does, particularly in this day and age. There's a lot of concerning things on the global level currently happening, and I'm sure, yeah, we've just released, actually, it's just started releasing. There's a free course we're doing on loving kindness, meta meditation, and I think the biggest like hindrance, this is why I was so pleased to be speaking with you, but the biggest hindrance or difficulty to be able to bring up this feeling is forgiveness. And I think this is probably, in many ways, it's probably the most important and potentially undervalued skill that's really somehow been lost. And I'm so glad that you have put it in a formula that particularly Western minds can understand. We know we like our our formulas.
When you say most important, I don't necessarily think that's true. What it is the necessary kind of last step on the train that most people leave off. So you go to therapy, maybe you feel better, but the therapeutic goal is often not full forgiveness. So your parents are off the hook, your ex-girlfriend's off the hook, your bum of a boss. The goal of real healing is to let them all off the hook, almost as if it never happened. Not that it never happened, but it's not a big influence now. Like, that's the goal. And so, in order to get to that goal, you have to release a lot inside of you. And people hesitate, like they want to change other people, they want to have a magic wand that makes the bad guys suffer. But the reality is, real healing involves some degree of personal renunciation and a kind of personal challenge to grow. And you don't hear that talked about as often as it could be if people were really looking at getting healthy.
Yeah, well put. And that's probably a good. We should probably actually define forgiveness and what it is and what it isn't, because that's probably, yeah, an immediate sticking point.
When over the years that we've been teaching this, we've come to understand that probably half of what we do is helping people understand what forgiveness is and is not. That more than you would ever imagine, that's our job. So people have all these ridiculous notions about forgiveness and who earns it and who deserves it. And if they forgive, they're letting Adolf Hitler off the hook. It's like they have these silly, silly ideas. And so a good part of our work is simply education. The key things to know about forgiveness are: one, they're letting go of the parts of life where they didn't turn out the way you want. They're making peace with them. That's all it is. Another way of saying it is it's making peace with the word no. You're making peace at the times in your life where you got to no to what you want, no matter how righteous the yes might have been. Even if it's somebody murdered your kid and it's a pretty damn good yes that my kid should still be here, we often get no to what we want. And forgiveness means we come to peace with the fact that we got no. And the central issue is the adapting to no. It's a very strong aspect of resilience and humility. And it also gives us the opportunity to cultivate gratitude for all the times where we got yes. So that's one, that forgiveness is making peace with the word no. The second is like, you forgive for you. You can't like make anybody else's life. I mean, you can try, but you forgive to release yourself from a prison. And that's a very different take than did somebody deserve it? Have they apologized enough? Has the world given me enough goodies so maybe I can be generous once? It's I do it to save and rescue myself, which is such a different take. So those are two central kind of understandings about forgiveness. The last one is forgiveness is essentially a change in story from a victim story, from a helpless story, from an angry story, focused on the past, to a story that presents a more hopeful future. So you don't have to do that much. You just have to free yourself from your self constructed prison and come up with a story that allows you to move ahead. That's not easy, but it's not as hard as people make it.
Love that. That's so empowering. I mean, it's really just giving you control back to your life about how you perceive
That's the whole thing.
future and
That's
current
it.
situations.
That's it.
I mean, anybody that does revisit, as we revisit these things that happened in the past, they definitely tend to, in many ways, they'll get worse. Or we could also look at that situation, say somebody did something to us in the past. We're in a particularly good mood. I don't know, we're out looking at nature, or and if we do revisit that in a lighter mood, we can tend to sort of reweight or shift the perspective on that automatically. So it's a really beautiful and empowering skill to learn.
And I'm going to say it's closer to true than I'm a helpless victim of bad, ugly people or circumstances. That may be true for a while. Like, there are things that happen that are so outside of our ability to cope with.
Mm,
So, terrible things do happen, or things that we have no skill to figure out. Helpless, vulnerable victimhood is a nice, safe place to rest for a while, so you don't have to do the hard work of making your own life successful. The problem is when that becomes pattern or a habit, you stop believing you have agency or that it's your life. You start absolving yourself of responsibility and say, my life sucks because of this that's in the past, and it's not my job to turn it around.
mm.
And that's not a healthy perspective for a happy life.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we really, I mean, almost everything outside of us is uncontrollable in some way. Even our best predictions, we couldn't fully understand the intention or background or experience of. It would usually be related to another person, I imagine.
We're not even fully in control of our inner experiences.
Right. Right.
So, you want to be careful even with that, but we have less control over others, and we literally have no control over the past.
Yeah,
So,
literally. Yeah, I think that's such a key point. We actually, and this is why it's so empowering to be able to forgive, because it's really just us. In many ways, it's just us feeling the pain of the past situation, particularly in our subjective context. So if we are empowered with this ability, we can become happier now, which also would increase our ability to be better people for everybody else. And you don't, I think, forgiveness is not, yeah, as you say, it's not letting them off the hook. It's, we don't have to agree with what they've done, but we can allow ourselves to become happier, to let go of this kind of weight.
I mean, in order to forgive, you have to have had a period of time of unforgiveness.
Mm, yes.
And you have to have created a grievance against something. Forgiveness resolves your created grievance, which it's not terrible to create a grievance. It's not terrible to say they did the wrong thing. It really screwed with my life. I've suffered the consequences now for a while. That's perfectly healthy. What becomes unhealthy is when you don't move past that. And so when you forgive, you're resolving something that you created. So it's not like you say, it's okay that they went through a red light and hit my car. Of course, that's not okay. But after 2 years, it doesn't really matter what your opinion is about it. I mean, that's the difficult reality. Like, who gives a shit whether you think it's okay or not? It's irrelevant. But we don't want to let go of that judgment, which gives us a kind of short term power to feel superior or to be able to blame something as to why our life isn't working. But we're not willing to sacrifice that opinion about something. And so forgiveness means, yeah, you accept the fact that you don't think this was right. And then you say at some level, so what? I don't think it's right. Things that I don't think are right happen all the time. It's like this is not the first time that's ever happened, and it's not going to be the last time. So, how do I now make peace with something that I don't think is right? That's the essence of forgiveness and why it's challenging, because you're making peace with something that you don't approve of. And that's a wonderful thing to attempt because, in a little way, it's the world healing itself. One little node somewhere is saying, okay, I've carried this around now for a long time. I've added my little dose of negativity to the world. Now it's time to clean up my mess and take my negativity home with me. That's what it is, you know. It's not esoteric and it's not even about the past. It's what am I doing now so that I don't have to construct that grievance prison?
Yeah, I just think of a lot of the people that I most respect in history and modern, um, like leaders that I really admire and respect. A lot of them have been through tremendous, some of the worst, probably the highest levels of adversity that you can possibly imagine. There's a there's a quote from, I think it was the Dalai Lama, and he was asking some of the lamas that had come back from China during the invasion of Tibet, that had been captured and like had horrendous things happen to them, and they'd been released and had come back. And I remember him asking him what was your greatest fear while you were, you know, going through, they were getting tortured and various other things. And I remember he said the greatest fear I had was that I would lose compassion for my torturers, or my these people that were, you know, they were creating tremendous like turmoil and suffering for them. And yeah, that's just it's such a, I mean, that would be extremely difficult, but it's such an empowering position to be in, being able to.
I remember hearing that as that his monk said the worst part was my hatred of the Chinese.
Right, right.
You know, that's what fouled my mind more than anything.
Mm,
I
right.
I know that's a remarkable statement.
It is. It's so, yeah, it's so empowering. He is not allowing the external world to kind of touch his well-being in many ways, or he has a faculty to be relatively unaffected by the external.
And we all have that facility to one degree or another, and we make choices as to whether we continue to focus on the ways that we have been harmed or focus more on how we can recover and move ahead. Those are attention choice points.
Attention choice points. I like that.
They are. And I mean, we would say that grief has to precede forgiveness. That you have to go through shit, you have to feel bad, you have to be knocked down, you have to suffer and struggle whenever something really painful happens. Your nervous system is really working hard to help you regain equilibrium. And that can take quite a while if it's a devastating loss, you know? If somebody you love is murdered, then that can take a couple of years to fully get back into balance. And that's what grief is. You know, you go through hell to integrate an experience into a system that wasn't ready for that experience. And it's like putting your mind in a washing machine, you know, you're like all over the place. What that grief needs to resolve. And when it doesn't resolve, it's unforgiveness usually or grievance. its resolution is forgiveness. It's not like I'm not suffering. It's that I paid my dues as a human being. I accepted my attachments and my linkages because I'm a human being. I recognize that it hurts at times to be a human being, which it does. And now I'm releasing my personal identification with this particular wound, but it's not like I walked around it. There was no spiritual bypass. I went there and I suffered. And now I don't need that suffering anymore. And that's the healthier arc. But it's not like it can happen sometimes in a day or a week or a month. When we did a project in Northern Ireland, we insisted that the people who come there whose family members were murdered, that it has to be at least 2 years from the time of the murder, because you need time to process and experience and maybe even develop a little empathy for other people. And it's not, we just decided 2 years and then we can talk to you about forgiveness.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's such a good point. The time you need before you could even start to readdress
Of
or
course. One of the ways we used to teach this in our classes when we were doing a lot of classes was we talk about, let's say you're on the freeway and you get cut off in traffic, right? And it would make sense if you're like in a hurry or somebody really tries to harm you. I've said to people, so give them the finger, like say, screw you for 10 seconds, and then you're done.
yeah.
There's nothing wrong with giving somebody the finger for 10 seconds, but that's it. Don't call four people after this and talk about how terrible the roads are. And don't go running after the person to give them the finger again. And don't start telling a story about how awful people are and blah, 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 blah. React if you need to with real emotion. That's your grief, and let it go. So, for something like being cut off on the freeway, it might be 15 seconds of, hey, screw you. For losing a job, it may be a month. For having your kid killed, it may be 2 years. But there's a period of time where it's absolutely within reason. I mean, you don't want to go shoot somebody because they cut you off, but it's okay to be human and have emotion and be scared and frightened and frustrated. But there has to be an understanding that at some point you unravel that and just let life progress. Just let it go. And that's the forgiveness piece. It's not that everybody becomes, I never react or everything's peace loving granola. It's not that way.
I love that. That's such a good point. And that's again a common misconception with meditation as well, that thinking is inherently bad, or that 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 it's actually really the identification, or the way that we feel this is my suffering, my thinking, and that's yeah, one of the big, more empowering realizations, I guess, that thinking just happens, but you don't need to be so tight or holding on to that. This is my suffering. This is my
Well, and it's helpful when things happen to feel and investigate the suffering. It's not wrong. What's not useful is to keep that investigation going long term or to think that, I'm the only person this has ever happened to, so I need to tell everybody for the next 5 years. You do get some wisdom and recognize that any pain that I have ever experienced is simply normal human pain. I'm not the first person to have their partner cheat on them, or the first person to have been lied to, or the 50th person to have been overcharged, or a business partner cheat. So a piece of it is, yes, this happened to me and it's awful. But then you release that over identification into, well, it's normal life and things happen and everything has its season, including being upset, but then you evolve past that. And as you go through that process, you're forgiving. It's like, yeah, it happened, but this is, it doesn't have to stop the presses every day.
Right, right. What is the some of the more profound or impressive? Because you must see what are the more common like issues or scenarios that people come to you with, and have you got any anecdotes or stories about some of the more profound things you've seen people forgive?
The best anecdote I have, two of them, the most two really truthful things, and then I'll tell you about what brings people into forgiveness stuff.
Beautiful.
The first, I was new at the game. I was teaching. I started as a researcher, so all of my teaching was for research. And then I started to slowly add some public teaching and, all comers. And either the first or second group that I led, there was a woman there who I chatted with a little bit, and she was in some chronic pain. And in part, she came to forgive. I didn't quite catch it, but I knew she had like chronic something, musculoskeletal pain. I ran into her again about 6 months from then at a local supermarket, and we started to chat. And she said, I'm glad to see you. Let me tell you a little bit about how your forgiveness class, lasted. She said, when I came there, I was in chronic pain. I had had something happen to my back, and what had happened was my husband and I were arguing. We were getting close to a divorce, and we were just like cats and dogs. We didn't like each other, and we couldn't stop. And it was like, constant bickering. And one day we're bickering and arguing while I'm on the back of his motorcycle, and we're fighting, and he's going up the hill and around the bend, and we're fighting and arguing and yelling, and he's trying to control the motorcycle, and um, he couldn't control it. Something happened. Either a car came near him, or he got on some wet leaves, and he lost some control. And the motorcycle hit a tree, and we got thrown off. And I hurt my back and my hip, and you saw me afterwards. But what your forgiveness class prompted in me was an exploration of, well, wait a second, was it really just his fault? She said, I was fighting with him every inch up that hill as much as he was fighting with me. And when he lost control of that vehicle, had I ever chosen to just shut my mouth, he probably wouldn't have lost control. So we co created that issue.
Wow, wow.
So that got me to start releasing stuff. And then I thought, wow, and he has it much worse than I do. That, I have some pain and I'm angry, but he had hit his head on something, and so he was at that point still not cognitively fully recovered. And she started to realize, well, wait a second. I may not even be the biggest victim here. My yelling, I'm not taking full blame, contributed to this poor guy, like basically being in a nursing home for a while because he didn't have all his marbles. So I went and visited him in the nursing home and apologized to him. Like, it's not okay what you did, but it's not okay what I did either. And what she said is, we got divorced. I mean, we weren't right for each other. But I started to go to the nursing home and help take care of him. Because once I got past my self righteous bitterness, I saw things more clearly. And I realized at that point I was a lot more capable of taking care of him than he was of taking care of me because I had some pain. He had a ruined life. And she said the amazing thing is when I forgave him, my pain went away. Like, I didn't have any more pain. So that was one of the more dramatic positives I've heard.
Hmm.
Another, and these are true. I mean, these are not, as close as I can come to true. We brought a group of people from Northern Ireland who were mothers who had their sons killed in the violence. And they came to Stanford. They spent a week with us, and we worked with them on forgiveness, but some other things, blah blah blah. And then we sent them back to Northern Ireland. And about a year later, we brought back a few of them and a wider group of people who had had individual family members killed in the violence. So we had about 18 people, each of whom had an immediate family member killed in their violence. And we're sitting in a room of not such happy folks. Um, one of the women whose son was killed, maybe a few days into the week, her daughter, who was there also, came up to us, the people leading this thing, and said, I have to thank you. You helped give us our mother back. That in the 20 years since, X was killed in this violence, she's just been lost in anger and self pity. And when she came back from you guys, it's not like she was a happy camper, but she was no longer acting the victim. And so we were now able to talk to her, and she could talk to us, and we were able to discuss the past, and we were able to talk about the future. And so she said, I really want to thank you for helping our mother find her way back to us. And that was pretty profound. So those are two of in my memory from I'm going to say some pretty serious forgiveness stories. Well, I forgot the second half of the question.
No, that really I think was incredible, and it was anecdotes and stories. So that answers the.
But you asked me something right before it too, but I don't remember what that was.
Um,
It don't matter.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was either, but it reminds me there's a book by a hospice worker, and she helped, I think it was 300 or 500 people go through the dying process. And then she wrote a book about the biggest regrets in life. And the number one is just like more time with family and not letting go or living by other people's expectations. So I think it's just, there is just so many reasons to forgive when you have gone through the grieving process and you are ready. It affects clearly your mental health, but also through that your physiology and your physical health. And I know I imagine it is the same type of research, but I know meditation has been proven to change the epigenetics, which is related to like longevity and various diseases and cancers and inflammation, which could have contributed to the bodily pain that you just touched on then. But then also relates to the default mode network, quieting of the default mode network, which is related to anxiety and depression, again, contributors of mental and physical health. So yeah, there's so many
But
reasons.
you do know that neither meditation or forgiveness are like miracle cures for
Yes.
disease.
Mm.
You know,
Yes.
they may help with some depression clearly, and they do help manage anxiety, and they have some effect on blood pressure and functioning of hormones, but you know, for most people, they're not like, well, you go learn to meditate and you're going to cure all your diseases.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's some magical thinking there. But
Absolutely.
what they do also is they minimize some of the ways where we interfere with our healing. You know, so if we stay angry, then the anger starts like collecting, so to speak, in the same pathways as physical pain. So it intensifies it and it makes it much harder to get to the physical pain because we're so pissed off. If we feel like a victim, we tend not to take good physical care of ourselves. You know, so we're not going to do a lot of the things that are helpful to us. These are wonderful, I mean, wonderful adjunctive, important things for every human being. But, you know, there are, um, like mindfulness has a salutary effect on most things. But again, you know, if you have a broken leg, you don't go to a mindfulness teacher.
Yeah, so that we don't want to we don't want to undervalue the doctor or medicine,
Yeah.
of course.
But they all operate on that sense of hyper arousal and threat that most of us have way too amped up, way too amped up. And in particular, if we've been in pain or we've been mistreated, then we get hypersensitive and we often misperceive our world because we're bitter. And they work on those qualities and they also just lower our general sense of arousal. So they will help with inflammation, they will help with the experience of pain, they harmonize the nervous system. I mean, you do all sorts of good things.
I love that. Yeah, and good to highlight this is part of a bigger picture of health, both
Oh,
mental
no
and physical.
question.
So in the book you outlined that the nine steps to forgiveness. So yeah, I'd love to dive into that.
Okay. I mean, you'll have to pardon me if I don't always remember them in order. It's been a while since I read my book. I mean, we can be we're talking maybe years. But the first step and the second step I brought up at least tangentially. One is forgiveness is for me. It's for my healing, my releasing, my growth, my peace. It may help a lot of other people, and it does, but I do it to free myself and reduce my burden. Second, forgiveness is about now, it's not about the past. We forgive because right now we want to stop doing the behaviors that keep us tied to the past. That's the forgiveness experience. We are relinquishing the negative habits that keep us recreating the past over and over and over. So complaining is a negative habit. Bitterness is a negative habit. Mistrust is a negative habit. They all can come from being badly hurt. But if right now I'm saying, I don't trust you because my dad hit me, that's ridiculous. It's like whatever dad did doesn't have anything to do with what the person in front of you is going to do unless you bring a prejudice with you. So at the moment that you're working on it now, that's where forgiveness takes place right now, so that we can be at peace with our life right now. Like it's a present centered mindfulness thing. Like no matter when it happened, right now is the only time I can address this. That's all I got is right now. The third part of forgiveness is it doesn't mean you have to reconcile with the offender. I mean, you can, but sometimes they're dead. So you're going to have a tough time reconciling with a dead person. Sometimes they don't want to reconcile with you, like, screw you, buddy, you can still forgive them. So it doesn't mean that you have to rejoin or improve a relationship. What it means is that you clean your mind and heart of your bitterness and self pity and obstacle to growth. They may or not benefit from it. It would be good if they do, but they don't have to. Forgiveness doesn't mean you can't take somebody to court or sue them or have them arrested. Those are not the same. They're like one is internal, the other's justice. Forgiveness does not mean that, again, I mentioned this, you're not making something okay. You're just saying that the lack of it being okay is not going to ruin my life. That is totally different. I mean, there's a lot of things that are not okay in this world. Right now, you and I are sitting in our very comfortable homes with plenty to eat and nice weather, and there's a couple of 100,000 people who are starving. That's not okay, but we're still going on with our life. It's like, and the last thing is forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. You don't forgive and forget. You remember differently. And what a key distinction that is. So there are some really serious misconceptions that people have about forgiveness, and those need to be dealt with. Like it's now, it's for you, and it's not these things. Those are kind of the prerequisites of forgiveness. The rest of the steps are some degree or other of, well, once you recognize that it's now, and I don't know if this is step 4 or step 5, I can't remember, is you have to calm down. That when you're aroused, it's on you to calm your arousal. Meditation can help, taking a run can help, knitting can help. But you have to do something that calms your nervous system so you get your brain back. And that's independent of whatever happened. It's because right now you are affected by it and you need to soothe that. That's the classic intermediate step, but it's essential. Instead of blaming and arguing, you calm down. You just calm down. And once you calm down, then you can remind yourself, like the Rolling Stones song, you don't always get what you want. But that's a central piece of forgiveness. I can't always get what I want, and I can only accept that. when I'm calmer. So when I calm down, I can remind myself, Fred, doesn't always work out how you want. People don't always do what you want them to do. Things don't always go your way. That's reality. From a calm place, you can, hey, that is reality. But it's a mental reminder. You don't always get things what you want. Not everything goes your way. Sometimes you get no. There's a place there for real mental reminding of a simple thing. It's not always going to be my way. Those two are the real essential qualities of forgiveness. I calm myself down now, and then I remind myself, you know, that's life. And it's common in life to not get what you want. And now I have to figure out something else to do than just being pissed or unhappy or crabby about it. So the next step is some very simple. The only real revenge is a life well lived. And what that reminds us is the only way we really pay anybody back is by being happy enough that what they did no longer matters. And that is such a powerful reminder that the only real revenge is my freedom and my happiness. And that's crucial. So when you're calm and you recognize I don't always get what I want, then there's a simple segue to, and, you know, the only real way where this doesn't matter to me is if I'm happy. If I'm happy now, I'm good. Doesn't really matter what happened in the past. But it's that the only real revenge is a life well lived. And then you start recognizing that that means I better start practicing a hell of a lot more gratitude because I need to have a life well lived. And the only way I can have a life well lived is I stop focusing so much on the negative and start focusing more on what's good. And that is a crucial forgiveness practice. It's basically the step of thank you. You know, I've already gotten myself into this rut by focusing so much on no thank you. Let me spend a little more time focusing on thank you. And it doesn't have to be profound. It can be like, I thanked you for being patient 15 minutes. I mean, you just get into more of a habit of saying thank you. So you notice how much abundance there is in your life. So it's easier to forgive when you see things more clearly. There are a lot of nice people around, like this guy who doesn't give me grief for being 15 minutes. He knows I didn't try to harm him in any way. I just couldn't get back. It's not a crime. But he was, hey, take your time. It's like, I'll be here. Well, that's a huge thing. And if you get used to, like, thank you have a lot more opportunity to forgive because you're seeing things more clearly. And then the last two steps are simply the story you tell. One is, what did you want from the situation that didn't work out? So if you got dumped by your lover badly, you maybe wanted a good love affair. If you got crappily treated by your parents, you wanted some adult help and guidance. If you're sick, you want health. So the next to last step is, well, I got to get back on the bicycle and go towards my goal rather than complaining about who took me away from my goal, because that's a complete waste of your life. Complete waste. After a while, after grief, it's stupid to tell people that I had crappy parents and that's why I have a lousy life. That's ridiculous. After a while, it's I had crappy parents, and I decided if they weren't going to do it for me, then I better figure out how to parent myself. Or I can use my partner to help me grow up, whatever. But if they can't do it, then you have to do it. And the last step on the train is, well, your story is about your heroism, not your victimhood, which is look what I'm doing to move ahead, not look how I was hindered by what kept me back. So those are the 9 steps of forgiveness, how you go through a process, come out the underside, having grieved what happened, but being able to look forward in thought and deed and have a story about the future more than the past.
I love it. And that just, I mean, there's so many incredible aspects of that, but you're just kind of, in some ways, repainting your experience of the world now.
That's it.
And that just gives so much, such a better ability to deal with situations, people. Like, I mean, an obvious one would be, yeah, something happened, a trauma when you were young, or you see a lot of my friends now that are becoming parents are making the same, in many ways, mistakes, bringing the child up as what their parents did. I think because they have not had the ability to, they've not learned this skill to forgive. And if you don't do that, then a lot of things they didn't necessarily agree with in their upbringing, you see them being repeated. So
And
yeah,
Josh, the other piece is it's hard for people to admit that you're spot on with your painting, but people don't admit that they did the original painting.
right, right.
Even if it's childish, like just throwing paint on a wall. So let's say you had really crappy parents and you didn't learn great skills. You still took that parenting and made a painting. It may be a crappy painting and it may not help you, but you made that painting. So the only one who can paint over it is you. So that's basically what forgiveness is, rather than staying mired in how limited I am because of the crappy tools I was given or the ugly colors to paint with. You make some peace. Yeah, I made terrible paintings because that's all I knew, but now I'm learning how to paint better.
I love that.
But that's crucial. That's the deal. Like, I have to learn how to repaint.
Mm,
So that's the efficacy that you hope to cultivate with forgiveness, which is I've been stopping myself from growing because I'm so busy in the past or blaming that I don't even see the paint canvas.
I love that. And that you could see how that would lead to a positive feedback loop, because if you get a situation similar to that, or you've taught your child or a friend or somebody else you might have shared as to how they could deal with this situation better, this experience better, then you can be also grateful for that. And then that just, I feel like, yeah, you would get to the end of your life and you would just be so. I always look at end of life because I just feel like it's such an obvious way you'll look back and they'll just be, you really don't want your end of life to be full of regret, or even your present life, of course. But
As an older person, two of the things that we need are one, like looking back like that and thinking, I did the best I could.
hmm,
Some of what I did wasn't that good, but I've learned. And that's part of the aging process. Like you get to a certain age and you have to look back at, did I meet my goals? Did I behave properly? What did I do? And you don't have to have been perfect. You can't have been, but you want to have some, you know, some places I drove off a cliff, but I got back in the car, or, but that's important. The other thing that's important looking back is if I made a mess by screwing up, behaving badly, failing, then the least I can do before I leave this planet is clean it up. And that's the other important part in older age is clean up your messes. If you screwed up your family, apologize to your children, like don't hold back. If you wrecked a relationship, I don't know, send flowers, whatever it is, but you have a responsibility to clean up your messes. And those two are two of the tasks of the older years as you integrate the past with your present. But forgiveness is central to both of those.
Yeah, I think it was, I hope I don't butcher this quote, but there was a quote, and I think it was Tony Robbins, and he said it was probably the most important decision he made in his life. And he just said he realized that what are the chances of people doing basically exactly what you think they should do the right way every time? Of course, that's not going to happen. And then what are the chances of you doing exactly what you think you should the right way every time?
I'm going to tell you that for me, that, and this wasn't in my original forgiveness conception, the whole idea took off when I I had not that exact insight, but if I spent a little more time paying attention to the good that people do and looking for ways to say thank you or appreciate it, then I'd be less savaged by the times they didn't. Like I could see that, like, a friend mistreated me, and that's what got me started in this whole game. But if I had spent more time thinking about friends who did good things, I would have maintained my equilibrium more when this one mistreated me because I would have seen things more clearly. So I used to teach all the time. It's like more important to remember to like acknowledge the good that people have done. Keep score with that, not so much keep score with the people who didn't. Like that's crucial to your mental health, but it's also crucial to forgiveness. Like, wait a second. Yes, this person did terribly. Yes, this happened. But wait a second, like, my life has been blessed in so many ways. Let me pay a little more attention so I can talk more accurately about it.
If I think of times when I might have created a situation where somebody else might have needed to forgive me, it was probably in my times when I most needed forgiveness, like a time when I was struggling or there was some scenario or something that might have happened to me. And you can see how that could just pass through. Without forgiveness, we're not empowering everybody to hopefully build the relationships back and get over and help each other reconcile and really support each other. So
And
I'll
one other thing is how important it is for parents to model this for their children.
mm,
So you want to see mom forgiving dad rather than giving him grief for 5 years. You want to see dad forgiving mom for, it's not like you don't say anything. Let's say mom forgets to go to the grocery store. I don't know, and dad can say, well, look, we don't have food. Mom forgot the grocery store, but, mom does a lot of good things. So I'm acknowledging it, I'm letting it go, and now one of us will go to the grocery store. Like, that's modeling forgiveness for a family. And what an important thing that is, not to avoid criticism, but not to get stuck in it. Just, yeah, mom forgot, dad forgot. Or for more serious things, watch the parents argue sometimes, haggle it out, but not lose that essential love for each other.
Mm.
This gives kids such a deep sense of safety if they're growing up in a home where people can, you know, let's say, argue with each other without hatred and move on from their arguments. Those are such good teachings.
Yeah, that's so true. And really, in many ways, the most important aspect is, yeah, being that inspiration or, kids pick up on that kind of thing. So they're so sensitive to the way we act, I think even more than what we say. They really want to see.
Well, they know if we're forgiving to them.
Mm,
Like
mm.
they're getting in vivo training. So it's one thing, kid, if you got a 63 on your English test. It's another thing to get a 63 and beat the crap out of a kid. And it's another thing to get a 63, sit them down and say, hey, I'm disappointed in you, but I still love you. And, I'm not rejecting you for this, but this is an issue. So you model forgiveness to your children all the time, or it's lack.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Like it's kind of a skillful way to come at it as well. If you are caught in the anger or frustration, you'll tend to maybe raise your voice or something, approach a situation in maybe what's not particularly skillful. Whereas if you you sit back and just, as you said, you calm the nervous system, then the other person might also be more open to your point of view. They might listen better. And yeah, it just really opens the door to people seeing from your perspective what might have been something hurtful.
Well, and a parent can apologize to their kid if they lose their cool. They can say, "Hey, that's on me. I'm sorry." It's like, but people minimize the impact of what they're doing to teach the rest of their family about things.
So you talk about forgiveness as a skill. I can imagine certain people that probably one of the more common things I see is like that forgiveness is tiring, or it sounds like maybe there's something still there, to me, but I wonder what your perspective on that is, and then how does forgiveness play like a larger role in societal contexts such as community conflicts and like global issues?
Of course, forgiveness is a skill. Those of us who do research have shown you can teach people to be more forgiving, and that's good for them. We've shown that if you take a group of people and you teach them to forgive, and you take another group of people and those don't get taught to forgive, and you follow them for a while, the ones taught forgiveness do better physically, emotionally, relationship wise. It's a skill. It can be trained, it can be taught. It's not esoteric, it can be. It's not necessarily religious, it can be, but it's an important life skill, and people like us have figured out how to do it. Like you follow these 9 steps and you're going to get there. um in terms of deeper things, like, it's not so easy to forgive an intimate betrayal. Oh, and that, I remember the question you asked, what are the things that bring people to forgiveness stuff?
Ah.
And number one is intimate relationship screw ups, by far.
Right.
So, cheating, lying, alcoholism, abandonment, mistreatment, abuse, from lover to partner, that's by far and away the biggest thing that people have to forgive. Second is parents for crappy childhoods. that's probably 80% of the deal. I mean, there's other things that come in, but by far and away is crappy ex-husbands, ex-wives, ex-boyfriends, ex this, crappy current partners, like mistreatment and unkindness from partners. But if the wound is deep, like your partner has a florid affair with a close friend, embarrasses the crap out of you, treats you terribly in public, and then walks out on you with a friend, like that's devastating. And you have to be kind on yourself to not expect resolution so quickly. This might take 6 months to work through or something, and it's going to suck for a while. But there's a kindness to that, of a self-acceptance of knowing, this is a major wound, and I'm going to have to go through things and learn stuff and feel sad and all sorts of things. In terms of, bigger issues that are political, that gets even tougher because you're dealing with two directions. One, like personal forgiveness. So, I can forgive this group of people for maybe harming another group of people, but that doesn't change necessarily the higher level relationship from one group to another. So I can be a Palestinian or an Israeli and forgive the Palestinians or the Israelis, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be any closer to peace if the leadership is still, committed to the destruction of the other, even though if there's a real groundswell for forgiveness may have some influence, but that gets tougher. You need a combination of leadership and culture and individual effort for bigger things. But one thing we can all do in terms of politics or anything is we can limit our own hate speech. We can do that. We don't have to say nasty things about people who disagree with us politically. We don't have to insult candidates who are not ours. We don't have to call them names. We don't have to call them stupid or terrible. We can influence the world by lowering our amount of hate speech. That's under us. Secondly, we can understand that in a big, diverse world, there's going to be lots of people who see things differently than we do. And part of our human being training is to deal with that. So that's a forgiveness is implied in those things. Yes, I may disagree with them, and it doesn't make them a criminal, or it doesn't make them a shit. It may make them somebody I don't see things eye to eye with, or even on a deeper level, maybe they did something I think is wrong, and I can hold that point of view, but I don't have to hate them. So those are contributions we can all make.
That would also increase our ability, I think, with more open perspective on how to potentially bring in solutions that might be more useful or a greater capacity, because you are becoming closer to reality, as you said. Um, yeah, and it comes back, I think, the analogy of you just painting the world in a different way, or perhaps repainting it, or more skillfully painting it. And that really does increase, at least in my own experience, my ability to see, yeah, to be more creative, to come up with new, fresh, more useful solutions, and also affects everybody around us with the way we treat them and the way we treat ourselves.
You don't have to fight so much. You don't have to add that to the world unless it's absolutely necessary.
Oh, thank you so much, Fred. I think this is, for me, it feels like one of the more important skills that a human can learn. And I'd love to see, hopefully, kids learning this around schools. I mean, that would be, I'm sure that that is already happening, but it feels like a fundamental skill that probably is missing from, particularly in the younger audience. I would love to see, yeah,
And you know that from your own life too. You can just
right,
feel it
right.
that if I had known how to really forgive myself and others, I would have had an easier path through this life,
Mm. Right. It would have
right?
a much easier, more
A
fun, more
much easier
beautiful.
path. You can feel that. Thank
Absolutely.
you for interviewing me and, helping maybe a few more people learn about forgiveness. It's a good thing.
I'm sure it will. Definitely, I can feel that a lot of the audience will be extremely grateful for next steps. I'm sure a lot of them are working, wondering how they learn more about you and your work and how they might forgive. What would be a good? I know you've got a book coming out that relates to addiction. So where's the best place to find you? What would be the next steps for anyone wanting to develop?
Anybody can go on YouTube. There's probably 100 videos of me teaching forgiveness.
Right.
My guess is you looked at one of them or so to figure, like,
Lots of them.
so, I mean, and I'm not of this generation, so it was very weird when people would call me and say, I've already seen you teach 12 times, and I think I don't even know who you are, but they can go on YouTube and see a video of me. My website is fredluskin.com. It has ways, and yes, I have a book coming out in March on forgiveness for recovery, but it's not, it's aimed at people in recovery from addiction, but it's a workbook that you can go through and gives our entire method in soup to nuts. Very simple. How do you forgive? And sometime around the same time, believe it or not, nobody had made an audio book of Forgive for Good. Forgive for Book is the I wrote 20 years ago, and that's the best-selling self-help book on forgiveness out there. But 20 years ago, they did not make audiobooks of self-help. So I just signed a contract with some company to make an audiobook of Forgive for Good. So that will be available around the same time. Um, but here's what I'll end with. It's like if people want to forgive, they'll find a way to do it. You know what I mean? There's information out there. I'd be happy if they used our information, but there's a lot of ways to do this. You have to want to do it.
Amazing.
Thank, thank you, Josh.
Oh, thank you so much, Fred. I really, really think you're doing amazing work, and I hope you continue. And yeah, I'd love to chat again in the future. I had many
That
more
would be fine.
questions.
No, I loved. I told you I looked at the list of interviews that had been done, and I thought these are good, important, serious people that they're talking to. This is not fluff. This is, trying to bring expertise and science to that. And that I commend that. I mean, probably 75% of what I said to you comes from research, not just from good ideas. And I believe that's a much deeper positive than just thinking you have a good idea.
Absolutely. And that's the gift of the modern age, I think.
It is so true. Take care and thank you.
So I wanted to take a quick moment to say that Liam and the rest of the team have been developing an incredible new 30-day course, which will be free both on the YouTube and the app. Every day it will be a lesson and then a short meditation. And you can follow along. It's got a lot of the science in there, and it's honestly incredible. I've had personal experience myself with how this type of meditation can really change your default quite quickly. So yeah, if you're looking to learn to meditate or you want to just overall improve your well-being, then we should be dropping that at the start of next month. So keep an eye out.